About today is fishing for trout in winter. And Len introduced himself and introduced the grant and said, Department of Entomology. Well, I spent 27 years here. I worked with the Minnesota Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit, was the first and only fisheries biologist on staff, and I was faculty member now and professor emeritus in the Department of Fisheries, Wildlife Conservation, Biology. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about fishing for trout in winter using some of the data that we collected on projects. And I just put this up, so catch and release season is going on in several counties in southeast Minnesota. And before I get going, this is a spoiler alert, I am not going to promise you that I will improve my fishing technique. And there's somebody in the room that knows how bad that actually is. But what I can do, I think, is to help you a bit with fly selection. So just to let you know, I do fly fish. This happened to be probably one of the best flukes that I ever threw in my life. But I do love to catch fish in beautiful places around the world. And I chose this picture because of the flowers in the foreground. So look around when you fish as well. So this presentation is about 4 studies that Len and I and Jim Perry, who cannot be here today, were involved in. We looked at brown trout growth, what their diet was, and then the abundance of aquatic invertebrates in the winter time. And although I took credit for Len, myself, and Jim Perry, the people that really did the work are pictured here. They were up in the field and wearing waders often during the winters. So we had 4 studies actually, and there were the largest one covered 36 groundwater fed streams down in southeast Minnesota. We looked at 12 a year, looked at both trout and macroinvertebrates. Another study was 6 streams that took place at the same time, 2010 to 13, and then a smaller study on 3 streams in 2010. So these are the 36, or a picture of the 36 streams that we looked at in southeast Minnesota. So we covered the riverless area in Minnesota, but as stated before, if you do fish over in Wisconsin or down in Iowa, please let us know or help us out. So, what we learned during those studies, I may help you catch fish in the wintertime. So the studies evaluated the abundance and type of invertebrates in the streams, and we looked at trout diets and growth rates. And so the important connection here is what were the trout eating, so we could match the hatch, and then look to see what was in the stream and what the trout were then feeding on. So first things first, you should get to know your streams. So down in southeast Minnesota, a lot of the streams are groundwater fed, may remain cool in the summertime and ice-free in the winter. And the ice-free habitat, good cold water, provides ideal habitat for both the brown trout mostly and cold-adapted insects. The cold water streams, groundwater streams in southeast Minnesota follow this particular trend here. So we have an annual cycle generated here. I'm using centigrade, but this is freezing. The groundwater fed streams typically remain above freezing in southeast Minnesota, and as opposed to streams that either do not have a lot of groundwater or do not have any groundwater at all. In wintertime, they can actually freeze over. And this slide shows real data in southeast Minnesota. And I put up an example here of Daly Creek, which is the red dots here. You can see that it stays well above freezing in this particular annual cycle. And the other thing here is that it remains ice-free and should be very accessible for fishing. The green dots here are another stream that we had in our study, which is Rush Creek. And note that there were a few times during the winter where the stream temperature actually dropped below freezing, and the stream never completely froze over. There were some areas that were free of ice, but there were areas where it covered the entire stream in the slower sections. And then the air temperature that we have matching up with that. So let's get into the invertebrates. And so the first and the largest study where we looked at the invertebrates in the streams, we were looking at what the abundance of the invertebrates were on a square meter basis, so about like this. And you can see, and there were a few sites down in southeast Minnesota that we had almost 10,000 invertebrates per square meter. And those, the higher numbers here, were typically in streams much like Daly Creek, which never did freeze over. There were other streams where the abundance decreased, but still, even in our lowest site here, there were 1,000 invertebrates in the stream per meter squared. And these streams on this side were closer to what Rush Creek is like, that actually did freeze occasionally. This is the only slide I'm going to show about how the trout grew. So these are adults, and the streams across the bottom here, and anything above the zero line indicates that the trout were growing. So you can see there's a lot of streams in southeast Minnesota where the brown trout continue to grow in the wintertime because of the abundance of macroinvertebrates. And just to help you out to pick sites, you might want to go to Hay Creek. You might want to go to West Albany Creek or Daly Creek, the one that I showed you the temperature example about. So what did we find? So the invertebrates that were in our benthic and drift samples, and when I say benthic, I mean collected either on or in the bottom. A large number of invertebrates were collected there. The ones I have in yellow, you're likely to see over in Dean's exhibit when you get on over there. And then take a look at, see how they behave. And you might be able to imitate with your fly how they move through the water. But prey for large trout, in this case 12 inches or more, we saw a smaller group than what I just showed you. So there were caddisflies often in the diet. Ficella, which is a snail, appeared a lot. Gammarus, which are scuds, and then Chironomid, pupae, and large Chironomid larvae. Which was actually Len's focus on the study. Oops. So, what do these things look like? Well, I have a limnophilid shown over here without its case. This is a limnophilid in the case. And this is a picture of a Ficella snail. So, what kind of flies actually match up with that? So, somebody asked me today, is there really a fly that matches a snail? Yes, there is. And the trout actually ate a lot of them in our study. The other thing here is an imitation of what would be a limonophyllid. In this particular case, a bee, and so it gets right down on the bottom, which is where most of these critters would be. We also have Brachiocentrus and Gammarus or scuds in the diet. And here are flies that would match up with that. So here's a good imitation for a Brachiocentrus, and it looks like it has its case. Here is and there are a lot of scud imitations, but this is a good imitation of a scud. Matches up very nicely with the bone.
Is this going to be available, the presentation?
We can make it available.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Then I'm not going to be taking pictures of these.
Oh, okay.
Match the flies.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't see any reason why we can't do that. So here are Chironomid pupae and Chironomid larvae. And here are some flies that match up with that. So I think this is a really good imitation of the Chironomid pupae, and lots of Chironomid larvae, flies that match up with Chironomid larvae. And all of those are in the water. What I would like to point out is that on nice, bright, sunny days, adult Dionysa, which is one of the chironomids, and Len's favorite chironomid actually, emerge, go up on the snow, and this is a male up on the snow, and you saw this picture before. This gives you an idea of how big these things are in comparison with the honey. But on a bright sunny day during our study, there were times when there was a large emergence and the trout absolutely went nuts. You might not be able to catch one because there's so many on the water, but if there's a modest number of them, I would suggest using a blue ring olive to match the hatch and see what you can get. Oops.
So you have to throw your fly up on the snow?
No. Thank you. So what happens is the chironomids emerge, the adults go up on the snow, mate, the female goes back to the stream to lay her eggs, and then the trout would be feeding on them. So, going back to the idea of knowing your streams, one of the things I want to tell you that all of those invertebrates that I showed you appear in different numbers, different abundance across the streams. So the trout ingested all of those, but the ones that were ingested definitely changed depending on the stream. So there's a suite of the invertebrates that are available. When you get down to the stream, just try a few and see what works. So, what did the trout consume? The large trout consumed mostly caddisflies and the snail. Small trout consumed mostly scuds and chironomid larvae, but both sizes of trout fed on all four of those groups. And the other thing is that if you're going to start off, pick something that you would find in or on the benthos rather than in the drift.
What is the benthos?
Bottom.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so either in the bottom or where you can reach them with your fly,
Okay.
right up near the surface.
Gotcha.
So, in addition to the study that we did, I thought I would go look to some sources on the web, and I found this site called Winter Trout, Minnesota, and that particular site recommended that you use a scud or a gold-ribbed hare's ear here's a couple pictures of those. And note that in both cases, what they suggested is that you use sizes 14 to 16. Then in an article that appeared about 10 years ago in Midwest Fly Fishing by Wayne Bartz, he said that he preferred fishing a stillborn midge, and that might work when there's a lot of emergence going on, so that the Chironomid's pupae start to rise to the surface, so the adult can emerge, but some of them get stuck partway through, and apparently Wayne thought that was something to target on nice bright sunny days if the fish aren't hitting your surface fly. The other thing about knowing your stream is that although the trout were feeding throughout the winter, the number of species that appeared in their diet was fairly low in early winter and midwinter, but as winter progressed and the sun started to come out and it was much more comfortable to be out there, there were a lot more invertebrates in the diet, so that might be a good time to go.
Reason was your explanation because the water temperature increased and the fish will be more active?
And as the water temperature increases, there's more invertebrates that are emerging.
More active as well.
Okay, so take-home messages. Know your stream from a number of levels, but one for sure is go to streams that are ice-free in winter. This is actually Gribbon Creek, and you can see even in the wintertime, snow on the banks. There's no ice, even right up on the shoreline. Diet is similar to the benthos rather than the drift, and what I've done here is just display the invertebrates that we found in the diet, and then some recommendations from either the literature or the website. And finally, enjoy fishing in the wintertime. And that's it. Austin, Bruce.
So how do you fish the snail fly?
I don't know, but the fish were, I've never tried it. I don't have a snail fly in my many boxes, but the trout ate a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I would think that, and the fly that I found on the web looked like it was a little bit weighted, and I think you just slowly work it along the bottom. Yes?
Specific stream data of what they're eating during what times of the year?
We, in the data that are in the dissertations and our publications, I don't think we split that out to that particular level. But where do you live?
I actually live up north, but I fish primarily on the rush.
Oh, okay.
Yep, but I mean, I hit Hay Creek and a lot of it now, by still water and not still water, white water, a good view, and so I would say, yeah, any information is beneficial for sure.
Okay.
What they're eating when, but.
I could, if you ask some specific questions and send them to me or Len, I will try to get the information. I certainly got in the water and helped the students collect, but I wasn't there on a daily basis.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ken, do you have a question?
Whether or not, kind of follow up on his question, if you could provide us, or you've got a list of references that we can go to in the literature or otherwise on the web, if we wanted more detail on the
Yes.
studies.
Yes, there are probably 10 publications that came out of this work.
Perfect.
Just for their reference, if you haven't got in touch, show Ann Miller and her book, Hatchet of the Midwest. She concentrated in the Michigan area, but loved it. So.